Hey, what's up, patrons? What's going on? Hope everybody has had a great weekend. I have to first and foremost apologize. Usually, I like to bring you Mosher's Mailbag on a Friday, but it has been a crazy busy weekend. I've had two daughters. They both had birthday parties this weekend. I had a daddy-daughter dance on Friday night, the first one, and then a basketball game for my oldest daughter Sunday night, which is right now when I'm recording this at 9:30. So this is really my first time since Thursday night that I've had a chance to sit down and kind of gather my thoughts and answer all the great questions that I had this week. And I had a lot. And that's one reason why I wanted to kind of made sure that everything was that I had to do was pass me, so I wasn't rushing through a Mosher's mailbag. So apologies for making you wait. I also want to say I think we've got about 7 or 8 new subscribers in the past week or two. So I want to thank everybody who signed up, and I hope that they particularly enjoyed this interactive mailbag that I do. And I encourage everybody to message me their questions about the Eagles throughout the week so I can get back to them. And hopefully, next Mosher's mailbag, I'll be a little bit more timely and get you by Friday or Saturday at the latest. So there were some really good questions, and I think I'm going to start off just talking about Nick Foles and the salary situation now. Some people asked about it, so more than one person. So I'll give you my thoughts, and so where we're at is the Eagles informed Nick Foles that they were opting in on the mutual clause that they have on the $20 million for 2019, and as expected, Nick Foles decided to opt out. And part of opting out meant that he had to pay $2 million back to the Eagles. That was part of his signing bonus from the last restructure. And so where we have it now is technically Nick Foles is out of the contract. The Eagles don't owe him, I believe, the $19 million overall is what comes off the books. But, and this is a big but, the Eagles can still retain him by using the franchise tag. Now, there was a report, I think, over Super Bowl weekend that that's what they plan to do. They're going to use the franchise tag on him. It'll probably be about $25 million, and they have the intention of trading him. But there have been some recent developments that I want to talk about. One, and I credit Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, for finding this in the collective bargaining agreement. Apparently, there's language in the CBA that says that the franchise tag's intended use is only for a team to keep a player. It is not meant to be used to use it as a trade chip or buying time to be able to trade a player. It's the good faith part of the franchise tag. So theoretically, ProFootballTalk.com went through this. Theoretically, if the Eagles and if Nick Foles were not seeing eye to eye on the franchise tag and maybe a team that the Eagles wanted to trade Nick to that he didn't want to go to, they could potentially file a grievance against the NFL, stating that the Eagles used the franchise tag on him in a violation of the spirit of the language of the rule, which says you can't do that for a player unless you intend to keep him. So that would obviously kind of be an acrimonious decision or at least breakup between the team and the Eagles. And I've felt all along that it will not get to that point because I believe, not reporting anything, just from kind of reading the tea leaves and listening to both sides talk, that they're probably working together as much as possible to try to facilitate a trade to a team that the Eagles would feel comfortable sending Nick to, like the Jacksonville Jaguars, and maybe a team that Nick would feel comfortable going to. Have no idea whether he would be comfortable going to the Jaguars, but their offensive coordinators, John DeFilippo, they were in the AFC Championship game 2 years ago. I think what Howie Roseman's aim would be to make sure that he can trade trade Nick Foles somewhere, get a decent third-round pick, and really try to keep him away from maybe going to the Giants or the Redskins. Back to the salary part about it. So I wrote earlier this week about how the Eagles were very tight against the cap. And some people always respond, why do you guys care so much about the cap? Howie Roseman knows how to manage the cap. This is such a big deal that people make too much noise about. Let me be the first to say, as a reporter, we know that Howie is excellent with the cap. The question isn't, will the Eagles get under the cap? They have to. Every team has to be under the cap. The question is more about what they can and cannot do to clear cap space. One thing you can do is restructure contracts. They did that with Rodney McLeod. I think they saved $5 million. Rodney obviously agreed to do it, or else he would have been cut, and maybe he would have been concerned about the type of job he could have found in free agency coming off an injury, or maybe he just really liked playing for the Eagles and was willing to be a team player and take a pay cut. But they saved $5 million in that, and obviously the $19 million they saved with Nick Foles gives them about $24 million already cleared. Now, overthecap.com projected them as being $16 million over the cap. So if they've cleared 24 million, they're already 8 million under. So they're currently right now cap compliant. But of course they are. The question is, if they want to put the franchise tag on Nick Foles, even with the intent to trade him, to get him on the books, they have to clear $25 million. So that means they have to do more to clear space. If they're, say, 8 to 10 right now, they would have to theoretically be 15 million more underneath the cap just to be able to accommodate Nick Foles to then go ahead and trade him, assuming they find a trade partner and assuming that Nick Foles wants to go where he goes. That's pretty risky if you think about it. Now, Joe Douglas and Howie Roseman may have found a way that they were going to clear $15 million anyway. But you start looking at players who would have to go to say $15 million, and you start talking about guys like Jason Peters or Michael Bennett or Chris Long, maybe someone we're not even thinking of. So the bottom line is, yes, Howie's great at the cap. Yes, they will be cap compliant. They already are. But the reason why you should be interested as a fan, and I won't say concerned, but just intrigued, is that in order to clear space, somebody will have to go. The other way to do it is to restructure a lot of contracts. But over the last year and a half, Brandon Brooks, Malcolm Jenkins, Lane Johnson, Zach Ertz, Fletcher Cox, and I believe that's 5. I think there was one more player who I haven't mentioned who has restructured their contracts. So there's not a lot of players making so much money right now that you can restructure that you haven't already restructured. And when you do that, what you basically do is take money assigned to this coming year and yes, non-guaranteed money, and you turn it into guaranteed money that's spread out over a future year. So it's like kicking the can down the road. So you can't just keep restructuring, or you'll get into a point in which certain guys are making, $3 million one year and then $21 million the next. That's terrible cap management and not something the Eagles would normally ever do. They've restructured who they can. They've moved the money around. They probably want to pay Carson Wentz a contract extension. I'm sure they would love the idea of bringing Brandon Graham back this year, but if Brandon Graham wants 12 or 13 million dollars, well, where do they get it? Like I mentioned, they might be 10 million under now, but they need 15 more if they really want to use the franchise tag on Nick Foles. So that's a roundabout way of me of saying, do I still think there's a chance if they find a trade partner that they can make this happen? Yes, but I also think that the idea that they put it out there that they're going to use the franchise tag and trade him for a third-round pick is partly the Eagles trying to drive the market and let people know so that they can try to get maximum value if they are going to take this risk and put the franchise tag on him. The one thing I tell you for sure, he will not be back as an Eagle next year. So hopefully that explained a little bit about the process of getting under the cap, what you have to do, and also the situation with Nick Foles. So I'm going to start the questions now. The first one from Frank G, and he says, can Carson Wentz and the Eagles win at least one more Super Bowl if Wentz stays healthy? And this is probably a generic answer. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say most teams that have, a top 10 quarterback have won a Super Bowl. Russell Wilson has won a Super Bowl. Tom Brady has won a Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers has won a Super Bowl. Ben Roethlisberger has won 2 Super Bowls. There are a few of the quarterbacks who are debatable on where they are. Matthew Stafford, Alex Smith, a couple of guys who have reached a certain level but have not won. Tony Romo was an excellent quarterback, never won a Super Bowl. So I'll say this. I think with Carson Wentz, the Eagles will be in position, kind of like they were with Donovan McNabb for a long time, to make Super Bowl runs year after year after year. And obviously a lot of that will come down to how they build around Carson Wentz and also how Carson Wentz himself comes back from this injury. He's got to figure out a way to stay healthier, and he's got to play at a level more like 2017 than 2018. But clearly, if he's anything close to 2017 level, and listen, 2018 was rough, but it's not like he was, Bobby Hoying either. He was still a pretty good quarterback. So I do think that the window for them will be open. You look at what's going on in New York and Washington, they're struggling right now, don't have a quarterback. I think we've seen Dallas. They can be very hot and cold with Dak Prescott and what they've put together. So I do think the opportunity will be there to win divisions and, continue to make playoffs. So, second question, Frank asks, is the franchise tag a huge risk? And that's what I went into before. Yes, it's a risk to have to pay him or have him on the books for $25 million come that first day of league year in March. I think March 5th, right? Because now you have to clear salary space just to put the franchise tag on him, just to trade him to get a third round pick. But I don't think the Eagles are going to do anything dumb like release guys that they really want just to be able to make, just to be able to get Nick Foles underneath the franchise tag. So we'll have to kind of keep monitoring this thing as it goes along. Great question. Last question by Frank was, why doesn't Doug P get more credit than Sean McVay? And that's a really interesting question. Sean McVay is called a genius. He just looked terrible in the Super Bowl, but no matter, I think he won Coach of the Year 2 years ago. Why do you hear more about Sean McVay than Doug Peterson? And it's a great question, and the only answer I can have is that it seems to me that McVay gets more credit for being a tactician and an X's and O's guy than Doug Peterson, who has, I think, proven to be a very good X's and O's guy and certainly aggressive with fourth down and in his play calling. But he's also kind of known as a player's coach. I think he has a great pulse, on his fingers on the pulse of the locker room, what I'm trying to say. And he doesn't get enough credit for that. And I think people just harp way too much on how backs they ran through, right? And then Sean McVay comes along and poof, voila, they are, in the Super Bowl 2 years later. I think that's why he gets more credit. And Doug doesn't really win the podium the way Sean McVay does when he gets up there and does his total recall of everything that's happened in his life since he was 4 years old. But I would agree with the assessment that McVay gets way too much credit compared to Doug Peterson. I think Doug doesn't get enough. Big Daddy Kane says, this is a good one. He asked me, your best guess as to who the starting offensive line will be in 2019. All right, so best guess, right? So we all know this is me guessing using my, we'll call it an educated guess. I do suspect that the Eagles are going to move on with Jason Peters. And so I know how high they are in Jordan Mailata. So I can't tell you, I can't look into a crystal ball and say he's definitely going to win the left tackle job, Big Daddy, but you're putting me on the spot and saying my best guess. I'm going to say Mailata left tackle. I'm going to say Isaac Seumalo left guard, Jason Kelce center, Brandon Brooks right guard, and Lane Johnson right tackle. So pretty much the same exact offensive line, except instead of Jason Peters, you're getting Jordan Mailata. And I'm sure everybody will look to use this against me if I'm completely wrong. But listen, I'm just going on the idea that Jason, I think, is at the end of the line. He still plays well when healthy, but I personally think that they need to cut the cord. I know a lot of opinions are mixed on this. I personally think that they need to move on, someone healthier, someone younger, and kind of build around Carson with a younger dynamic core. And I know how much they love Jordan Mailata, and we all saw in the preseason that a guy who had never played a down of NFL football in his life, who had only played rugby, looked like he could adequately play left tackle in his first go-around doing it. So I think I was impressed. He's had a whole year to work. Yeah, he had the back injury may have set him back, but he'll have all of OTAs. He'll have all of the off-season programming, strength and condition, and then he'll have an entire training camp. And he's a smart dude, so I wouldn't put it past him to win left tackle. Good question, Big Daddy. Keith W. with the next question. What's the next big shoe to drop? Well, I probably just forecasted a little bit. I mean, between now and the start of the combine, probably not much is going to happen because it's at the combine, which is in about 2 weeks, that Howie Roseman and Joe Douglas and the personnel people meet with all the agents and all the agents representing free agents and agents representing all players around the league. They'll also be meeting with team executives and trying to figure out trades and things like that. So I don't know if anything's going to happen between now and the combine, but if there was, I would say that maybe moving on from Jason Peters would be the first thing to happen. The only other thing would be to be able to maybe I could see bringing somebody back on a 1-year deal, maybe Jordan Hicks, maybe Ronald Darby. It would have to be an in-house player. Maybe let's see, Hicks, Darby, maybe a Nelson Aguilar extension because that's due this year. But again, that might probably not happen until they get back from the combine. So we'll see. I predict no moves until then. But if a big shoe, and he only asked what's the next big shoe to drop, I would say the release of Jason Peters. We'll see what happens on that. All right, Patrick K asks, are there any practice squad players that have a good chance to make the team? Awesome question. This is the perfect time of the year to talk about that stuff too. And by the way, Patrick, thank you very much for the kind words. I'm glad you're enjoying the content and the website. I think two guys stand out on the practice squad. One is going to make you probably laugh or spit out your water. But the first one is a defensive end named Joel Ostman. He was a guy, if you remember, last preseason. He's been with the Eagles all year. He relentless motor, fast off the edge, perfectly suited for Jim Schwartz's wide 9 technique. A little undersized, but he's had all year to put on some muscle. He was playing a lot of those pass rushers all throughout the playoffs. He would wear the penny for their team's best pass rusher and on the scout team. So I think he's got a chance because I think there's going to be a lot of turnover on the defensive line. You're talking about, Chris Long might be gone. Michael Bennett might be gone. Tim Jernigan might be gone. So, they're going to be looking to plug players back in. And obviously Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat are coming off injury. So I think Joel Ostman is a guy that you'll have to keep your eye on and monitor next OTAs and training camp and everything like that. And don't laugh, but it's true. Donnell Pumphrey is on the practice squad. They did trade up for him and use a 4th-round pick for him. They brought him back. Much like D-line, there might be some major changes in the running game, and they are trying to get younger and cheaper. And here's a guy who's both of that. Now, is he any good? I have no idea. No one's really seen him play all year. So he'll come back and give himself a fighting chance to make the roster in training camp. So I just wouldn't put it past him. I wouldn't say it's probable. I wouldn't say it's likely. But to answer the question, I would say there's a chance Donnell Pumphrey from the practice squad has a chance to make the team. Next question from Michael M. And he says, do the Eagles want Jason Peters? What are their plans? Well, I don't exactly know what the Eagles are thinking. I do speak to people in the organization, but this is not exactly getting broadcast all around the building. I don't really know what their intentions are. I just get a feel, like I've been saying, that they are going to try to get younger, cheaper, more reliable from a health standpoint. And I think if I were to do that, my decision would be, if I were to cut bait with Jason Peters, I would then have Jordan Mailata, Big V. I would use a draft pick on an offensive lineman and probably try to sign a veteran offensive lineman on a 1-year deal and have all 4 of them compete throughout the year for the chance to win left tackle. And if all 4, and that's good options right there. That's 4. If all 4 stink and it doesn't work, you can always move Lane Johnson to left tackle and try somebody else out at right tackle. I don't think Lane wants to do that, but I think he would from Frank, $5.6 million. When they're trying to get younger and can he occupy that kind of salary? And Chris himself has said he's looking for more playing time, and I don't know if the Eagles are going to be able to give him that. So it's really up in the air right now, and I think it kind of depends on what happens with Brandon Graham, what happens with Tim Jernigan, and some other guys in the D-line. If they have money because Brandon Graham walked and Tim Jernigan was cut, or they didn't want to restructure his contract. And I keep bringing that up because he's under contract, but for $11 million next year, way too high, coming off the surgery, coming off only playing, a quarter or a half of a game when he came back. He's going to either have to lower that cap by restructuring, or the Eagles are just going to cut him. And remember, this is a very strong defensive line draft. But to get back to the question, if the money is there because a bunch of people left and they feel like it's important to have Chris Long and some veterans to groom a young offensive line, and because Chris is very productive player, at $5.6 million, you could probably keep that. But if you're bringing back Brandon Graham, if you're bringing back Jernigan, if you're keeping Michael Bennett, then you're probably going to have to cut bait with someone, and it might be Chris Long. So I think I answered everybody's question. I hope everybody enjoyed. Again, I'm sorry that it took me until Sunday night to do it, but let's keep firing away. Bring me some questions throughout the week this week, and try to get back to you in the next Mosher's Mailbag. All right, have a great week, everybody, and stay warm. I know the snow is coming.